Welcome back to the channel. This is John Modern with Compass Real Estate, and today we're going to talk about how much house $1 million gets you in Golden, Colorado. Why is this price point important? You know, I think a lot of us grew up thinking $1 million house was some luxury mansion in Newport Beach in California. And as we all know, in 2026, $1 million in Newport Beach is probably a parking spot. I'm not completely sure. That's not my market, but we're going to talk about what $1 million does in Golden. So we'll talk about some real world examples of houses that have closed recently in different parts of Golden around $1 million. Something to talk about where $1 million falls in Golden. Well, we just talked about an extremely luxury market like Newport Beach, California. $1 million in Golden could be a really healthy remodeled house in certain neighborhoods, and in other neighborhoods it could be a complete fixer-upper where you're taking it down to the studs and starting over with new drywall. It just kind of depends on where you are. As far as how competitive it is, kind of also depends on where you are. If you're in Applewood West, $1 million can be highly competitive, even for a dated house. There are plenty of families looking to pick up a project for their forever home if the square footage is right. In Mesa Meadows, it could also be really competitive because people are willing to fix up a house in that neighborhood and make it a lifelong house. So again, just kind of depends where you land. Yesterday, $1 million was a 1%er's house. And today it's almost like the everybody house. So it's where a lot of people fall and where a lot of people can afford to buy. How does $1 million compare to other areas in the Denver metro area? Well, there are lots of suburbs where $1 million is a ton of money and you can get a completely fixed up house. There's even neighborhoods in Denver where $1 million goes a really long way, just depending on which neighborhoods in Denver you want to be in. Golden is a very small part of the Denver metro area. So while its name is big, there are still only about 20,000 people in Golden. So $1 million doesn't go quite as far in Golden compared to the region as a whole. All right, example one, Genesee, Colorado. This is kind of a very popular foothills community in Golden. And at 1269 Pomegranate Lane, a house sold late last year for $1 million. It was 3 beds, 3 bath, part of an HOA. And I'd say the updates were a mix of kind of 80s and 90s. So you could certainly bring a lot of money to renovate it, but it is turnkey technically. You could move in, live in it how it is. A lot of it has vaulted ceilings with like tongue and groove wood ceilings, which are really beautiful. So there's some elements of the home that are definitely worth upgrading. And this is a foothills house. It's a little bit outside. You know, if it's snowing in the Denver metro area and you work downtown, it's going to take you a little bit longer to get down the hill, as we say, and into the metro. So it's about 3,000 square feet also. So about 3,000 square foot, pretty dated. I'd say most buyers I work with would walk in and just kind of give it a nah. All right, this next house, house 2, went for $950,000 late last year. It is 950 Jackson Street in Mesa Meadows. Mesa Meadows is a really popular neighborhood. It's just north of downtown Golden, just to the west of North Table Mountain. So you have great trail access to North Table Mountain trails and really good proximity to downtown Golden. A lot of families I know that live up there just kind of take their family bikes, or everybody hops on a bike and just rolls down into town, and it's a great option. However, this house sold for $950,000. It was 4 beds, 3 baths, which sounds pretty big, but it was only 2,588 square feet, and it wasn't super updated, and it was right off of Highway 93. So you get really high winds right there. 93 is a highway that kind of goes all the way up to Boulder from Golden, and so you deal with a lot of traffic. You've got trucks, commuters, kind of everything in between. So, you know, $1 million on a really busy highway, and just about 2,500 square feet. So that's another really good example of what $1 million does. You can get into Mesa Meadows. Most of Mesa Meadows is significantly more expensive. But if you're willing to sacrifice immediate location and be on a highway, you can still do it. And if you're willing to live in 2,500 square feet with your family, if that is the right size for you, this could work. All right, we're gonna talk about Applewood West next. Applewood West, my neighbor's house went for just over $1 million. It was a split level, 1970s everything, or 1960s, somewhere in there, and they're doing a complete studs down remodel. So You know, I think their uncle's helping them, so they're getting really good pricing. But if their uncle wasn't helping them, they called a contractor out of the Yellow Pages. this would have probably been a $250,000 to $300,000 renovation. The house was roughly 3,500 square feet, 4 beds, 3 baths, and is on about a 14,000 square foot lot. There's another house in Applewood West. Now for $1,050,000, 13280 West 30th Avenue is currently for sale. It's only 3 beds, 2 baths, 2,100 square feet, over $1 million. So again, in Applewood West, you know, and this one's also dated. So you can get a larger house that's dated, like really dated, or you could get a house that was, you know, maybe remodeled in the 80s or 90s, not quite as old, but still really dated, but less square footage. So Applewood West, $1 million, I'd say, is almost always a fixer-upper. Now, if you're willing to go into a Hutchinson Ranch a little closer to the highway, there are good options for you. 13592 West 24th Place went for just over $1 million, and it was completely renovated. This part of Applewood West is a little bit closer to the highway. You've got a little bit more highway noise, a little bit smaller lots. We're talking, you know, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 square foot lots versus 15 to 20,000 square foot lots. And they're largely Hutchinson Homes tract ranch homes built in the 1960s. So Hutchinson Homes was a builder back in the 60s. They made these quick. They're really solid though. I love them, but back in the day they were considered a tract home. Their layouts are all very similar. Ranch home with a basement. So these are a really good option if you want a turnkey house that's been remodeled and you want to be in Applewood West, but you're not willing to pay the premium of some of the parts of the neighborhood that have larger lot sizes and are a little more insulated from the highway. Now, a little bit even further out from some of the more core neighborhoods, you can find newer houses. This next one was built in 2016. 15220 West 50th was built in 2016, over 4,000 square feet, 4 beds, 4 baths, $1 million. And this is a newer house, right? All, you know, larger closets, none of the compromises that we make with some of the older inventory. It's a little bit further out from Golden's core, but it's a great option for people who are like, look, walk-in closets are a must. More bathrooms, larger bedrooms, larger, you know, taller ceilings. Some of these 1960s ranches, they're 8-foot ceilings. Some people feel a little confined in those spaces. So if you're a fan of a newer construction home and you're willing to be just a little further outside of Golden, you can get a turnkey house built in 2016 for $1 million. The one compromise, you're not as close to Golden's core. If that doesn't matter to you, no big deal. It's a little bit further from trail access. You can still ride to the trails. It's just going to take you a little bit longer. And the lot size, this is the big one. It's a 5,600 square foot lot. A lot of times I go into these houses with buyers. They love everything about the house, but then they look, you know, out the back patio and it's like the other neighbor is right there. The other neighbor is right across the fence, and you're kind of really good buddies with all your neighbors. Some people like that feeling. Some people really don't. But if your musts are walk-in closets, newer construction, there's an option for you. We've talked mostly about single-family houses in different parts of Golden, but there are also townhouses and some cases condos in downtown Golden that can be a great option as well, especially for lock and leave people who maybe don't live in town all the time or just don't want a yard to maintain. So those options exist as well. Some of the options we talked about are investment properties. You know, and it's kind of hard for a lot of people, especially first-time or even second-time home buyers, to consider $1 million as an investment property. It all depends on what's right for you. So, you know, are there options at $1 million? Yes, depending on where you want to be. Could mean a lot of work or could mean turnkey. It just depends what neighborhood you want to be in. So it really comes down to your personal preferences and priorities. If you have to be in the middle of Golden and you only have $1 million to spend, be prepared to make a sacrifice on space, closet size, and really the condition of the home. If you really need big closets, get outside of Golden's core a little bit into a newer suburb with a newer house. Whatever the price point is for you, if you'd like to see some of these homes, I'd be happy to chat. There are plenty of $1 million options, despite what you've been told.